Good afternoon. It's 11 o'clock. My name is Greg Chambers. I'm showing you this video only because I am live. And so as you have questions, I encourage you to use the chat box, which I have put down here on my lower right. You can't see it on my desktop, but this camera does make me nervous. So I am going to stop my video, but hopefully you can hear me. If there's problems with the audio, if you see my lips moving, but there's nothing happening, go ahead and hit me up in the chat, and I think my chat friends should be here to help with that. My name is Greg Chambers. There we go. My name is Greg Chambers, and we're talking today about Google Analytics. We call this Google Analytics Measure Twice, Sell Once, the 5 steps to successfully using Google Analytics in lead generation, which as I go through this, hopefully it will become clear as to why we have it titled this way, because it's a lot of times we're asked questions about analytics and it can't always do the things that the people that are asking the questions expect us to tell them how it works. So we're going to work our way through that. If this is not you, if you're not interested in Google Analytics, it's another webinar that you were looking for, this is your time to get off, to deplane. I told a story to a friend about being in the Southwest Airlines cattle call and getting on the wrong plane. But luckily they catch you right when you try to board, so they can send you back out into the mass of people, and we can go from there. But let's jump into what we're going to be covering today. So today we will go through 3 big concepts around Google Analytics. And then in that, I'll double check to make sure that we understand that before we jump into the 5 steps that we think you should take. And after we run through that, then we'll open it up to a broader Q&A. All the Q&A, you should really, there's a Q&A box if you see on your Zoom controller. You can ask the question in the Q&A. It does, yep, there's Victoria in the chat box. She will, if you put the question in the chat, if I don't see it, Victoria will throw it up into the Q&A, and then we'll have a chance to answer that question there too. And then at the end, we'll introduce you to your bonuses, and we'll show you how you're going to get those. So before we get too far into this, though, I want to do this quick survey. So I'm going to launch this poll, and there's 2 questions in the poll. And so if you could pop through real quick. The first one is, do you use Google Analytics or any other analytics package? And if you could answer that and submit your answers. And then how often are you looking for this information? And so, hey, it looks, there's some answers that are popping through there. Daily, weekly, not often. Running through, not sure and neither. I like the not sure and neither answers, because that's how I feel about most things most of the time. Let's see, Google Analytics. So right now, 66% of people have voted, but I think we get a general flavor. So Google Analytics, people are using it. We have questions around that. And then if you're using this, let's see, daily, if you're using this daily, there may be some things of value in the webinar. If you're rarely in it, like monthly, not often, maybe more of this will be to your liking. But I'm going to go ahead and find my mouse here and end the poll and show you the results. So this is what we have. So we have Google Analytics, and people are either in their daily, weekly, or not often at all. So that's good. And let me, you can't see me struggle with my mouse here. Stop sharing. Take the poll away. Okay, let's jump in by going right into the 3 big ideas that we have. We do this because I want to make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to Google Analytics. And 1, 2, 3. The first one is, this is the first big idea. Where does your site fit into your sales cycle? The reason this is important is because analytics is an online tool, right? Google Analytics, you install it on your website, it measures those things. And oftentimes the questions that we have of our analytics packages occur offline. So the first question we usually want to ask is, where does any online activity fit inside of our sales cycle? So right here, we drew up 2 different ones, because using us as an example, the reason this is important, since it doesn't measure all activity for one of our businesses, which is US Farm Data, almost 100% of the activity is on the right-hand side, which would be people are looking for the information, they search for us, then they go to the site, they fill up a form, and then the offline activity occurs right before the sale, just in processing the order. If you contrast that with our consulting arm, most of that is actually led by a human being. And then the website really serves as content and support, but supporting the salesperson. And then if there's any new information that is requested through there, then it comes back to the follow-up and then onto the money. So the reason that I bring this up is because if you're online first, you'll use like an e-commerce business that all it does is 100% e-commerce should be married to analytics. But a business that is online, offline, and I know from talking to a few of you before that that's a regular mix of business that we see where we kind of introduce concepts and then people go away from us and then they do some research and they do research online and then that's where they might bump into our website again and then they come back to us. Having to match that up before we start asking analytics any questions, we need to know where the website fits into our sales cycle. So big concept, pretty easy. The second one is be data informed. We want to be data informed, but we don't want to be data driven. Anymore, we're getting a lot of information that gets pushed towards us where the idea is that all this information is out there, every bit of information is out there. So there's perfect knowledge somewhere. And what we're trying to do is we're just trying to divine it. And once we have this information, these algorithms will make decisions for us and help us grow our businesses. And what I found is that it's much more common that we have imperfect information and we need to be very human about how we analyze it and pull together each of the tea leaves, right? It's instead of trying to look at the information and say, oh, we're going to separate the signal from the noise, what we do is we're trying to tell ourselves, we just want information, the data to inform us and not dictate our actions or what it is that we're going to do as we move forward. So I threw up this little grid because when it comes to lead generation, we often use these terms, and I'm sure you do too. Marketing qualified lead, that's an MQL. Sales qualified lead, SQL. So what is a qualified lead to a salesperson is often not the same as what is a qualified lead to a marketing person. So the lines that are separating that grid, right, is the prospect aware of the solution on the left, yes or no, and is the solution perceived as valuable to the prospect by the prospect, not by us to the prospect, but does our prospect actually agree with us, whether it's the change is minor, significant, or game changing? That's where the lines between the definition of those terms is where we get the most use out of analytics. So let me give you an example there. We had a client who was prospecting, and as part of their prospecting, they were sending cold emails into their market. So as they send cold emails into their market, one of the things that was happening was the person, and rightfully so, they would ask us, they said, can we have opens and clicks? Because that's pretty common as we're adding to our own database. We need to see the email addresses of the people who opened and who clicked on the email. And now this email in this particular case was leading to a page with a form. And they weren't talking much about the form. So the question that we had for them was, what are you going to do with this information? And he said, oh, it's easy. I have the reps call them. And I'm like, oh, well, call who? I call opens and clicks. Well, okay, so somebody who opens an email, I think we should all agree is really towards that left-hand side of this grid here, where they are in that marketing qualified lead segment. So when you give that to a salesperson to follow up on, all they do is get bitter because the lead is so early staged, as opposed to what they really want to talk to, which is the person who has raised their hand and said, you know what, I'm interested. I just need to know how to pay for this, which is more towards the upper right-hand side of that grid. So when I say that we're trying to be data informed, not data driven, that's where it comes from. Just because we can register this information and doesn't mean that we necessarily need to act on it or set up systems that act on it. We need to apply a little bit of our human knowledge to this process. So that's be data informed, be data driven. Okay, so the first concept was, where does your site fit in the sales cycle? The second one, before we even get into where analytics fits into this is, even though analytics is going to give us way more information about our site visitors and prospects and customers than we've ever had before, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to give us information that we're going to be able to act on. To get that, what we're going to need is we need to map our customer's decision process. So the other big idea behind all this is we know where we think that it's going to fit in our sales cycle, right? I can define, like I did on the previous slides, this is where people are going to come into our website on our sales cycle. It's way more valuable to actually know from the customer themselves how they go from, oh, you know what, I've never thought of that, to I need it. I need what it is that you're offering to me. So because analytics, again, is not 100% online, what part of the report, when we go into the report, is the most important part. So I use this example of, this is just general how people make decisions. Starting with, at some point there's a problem or a result that they're after. We do research, we teach ourselves about what is available to us, and then we move through to the options that make the most sense to us, and then we look for a good way to make that part of a purchasing decision, right? So we look for a best deal at that point. For instance, car buying, I happen to be in the market again for yet another car on this. And so my customer decision process, if the auto dealers actually cared, they would know that the first thing I'm doing is I'm trying to define what it is, like what kind of car I need. So in this case, we ended up with a little, one of those mini SUVs, because the kids are grown, they're driving their own cars. My wife is small, but she likes to sit up high in the car. So a mini SUV. And once we have that, right, so we've narrowed it down from all cars in the world to these mini SUVs. And then as we start researching them, gosh, you can spend anywhere from, $18,000 to $100,000 on a car that fits in that same class. So what is it that is our budget, right? That's narrowing it down to the options. What options actually work for us? And then as we get into those options, then I've narrowed it down. I say, okay, I want to spend $23,000 roughly, and I find, let's say, a smattering of cars. I find 6 cars that fit exactly that criteria. Mini SUV, $23,000. I'm okay that it's used. It's okay that it's got less than 30,000 miles on it. It all fits. And then what do? I go in and I say, I'd really like to spend $22,000, right? I negotiate my best deal. Your customers go through something very similar, no matter what the process is. And my question is, at what point in there does your website fit in? What other websites fit in? If we can get that directly from them, right? The little saying around here is get the how directly from the who. If you can get the how from the who, and we know where it is that they're going to be, that gives us opportunities where we can impact their decision process, especially where it's most valuable, which is in that problem and research phase. So the way you do it, if you're wondering, when we get in front of customers, what exactly are we doing? Well, the first thing we do is we say, we just ask them before they got started. So before you made this decision, if you could, we start with current customers and say, before you made this decision where you actually chose us, what is it that you were doing beforehand? And the further back we can go in the process, sometimes it's way too early and it's too expensive for us to try to influence the process at the very beginning. But a lot of times we can move back a couple steps from I'm looking for U.S. farm data to you know what, I was looking for who are the biggest farmers in California, the biggest corn farmers in California. And once I had that information, well, then we can start putting information around that area so that we can influence them when they show up. So that's how you do it. So before you just say, hey, Mr. Customer, before you made this decision, if you could just describe the process to me and then listen very carefully and it will pop up. So those are the 3 big concepts just to make sure we're on the same page. Where does your site fit into your sales cycle? Because that's where analytics is going to be able to actually help you. Be data informed, not data driven. Aim to be data informed versus data driven. Instead of trying to find a way where we can make a perfect decision where nobody talks to anybody, How is it that we can just make ourselves smarter so that when we are actually working with customers, we have more information? And then the last one is know the customer's decision process from the customer, as opposed to from like in the, for instance, is Greg Chambers sitting in a room saying, this is how I think my customers make this decision. Why don't we just go ahead and ask them? So with that in mind, I don't know if there's any questions on the three concepts. They're vague enough that most people just kind of agree that, yeah, okay, I gotcha. We're on the same page. Because now that we're on the same page, we can dig into what the 5 steps to using analytics inside of lead generation. Looking at it through the lens of lead generation. So if there's any questions, I'll remind you to go ahead and use the chat box, and Victoria will manage those, and then we'll throw them up into the Q&A. But since we're all on a time crunch, I'm doing really well here, by the way, on my own little timing that I'm trying to get to. So the 5 steps you take. You may have done some of these, you may have done all of them, you may have done none of them. Either way, let's pop into them. Number 1 seems very obvious, but install tracking on every single one of your properties. So your site, your public pages that are out there, your blog. It's interesting how many times we've seen that there's that the blog was set up separately from the website, and the two are not using the same analytics information. And even in cases, sometimes the URL is different, and it's not transferring the information between. So we lose track of visitors. They kind of go into a black hole when they're on our site. Landing pages, we see this with landing page tools. People use Instapage or lead pages to help with marketing campaigns, and these things are not connected inside of there. And it's probably goes without saying that it makes perfect sense that if analytics cannot fire on a page, we have no way of tracking the activity on that page. That being said, it's amazing the number of times that we bump into the analytics is not set up on every page. So if your customer's journey includes visiting your site, you should be tracking it no matter where on the sites there are. And what we found is, I worked with a real estate company, and they used a back-end software that they did not have control of. But guess what? They were just able to, they went in, they asked and said, can we install our analytics on the pages that you guys have set up for us? And that company was ready to do it. It was all pre-configured, ready to go. They could just jump right in. And that way, even when they went to the, in this case, it was like a leasing information site, you could still keep track of that visitor. And once they were able to do that, they got better knowledge for their lead generation efforts. So that's it. The one thing to remember is if you go look at your Google Analytics code and somebody else set it up for you, and it's on every single page, but it always, this is what the code looks like, as Universal Analytics, and then it gives you a number, and then it says -1. For the most part, it should be -1 for your business, for your website. If you're doing any segmenting, but you've drifted into like, oh, well, I'd set up, -2 and -3 and -4 are tracking different things. Yeah, I'm okay with that as long as -1 is still catching all the traffic. But what I've seen happen is marketing companies set their people up, and they set everybody up as a sub account. So number 32 means that you were the 32nd account that they had set up underneath their analytics. Unless Google's changed this, it's they cannot share your information with anybody else who you're trying to work with going forward, and they can't transfer it out to you so that you can own it on your own. So for pulling reports, it's not a big deal, but going forward, what we really encourage is that if you haven't really started using analytics and you're going to get started over again, get it under your own analytics number that you own, and then share access out to the marketing companies that you work with, because they can pull the reports and set up goals and do things that they need on your account. But that way, should you ever, not that it ever happens, but should you ever leave and go to a different vendor, that vendor still has the ability to look at what's gone on before and gets to go to school a little bit on some previous efforts. And we'll talk about that too. So make sure it's on all pages, even the interior or old pages. I have other stories. I won't go into them, but suffice it to say, it just you can never be too sure And the easiest way to make sure is actually to pull up analytics and make sure that you see all your pages that are supposed to be set up in there. All right. So number two, once we were sure that everything is set up on every page, we want to go through and build a report. Google Analytics they've done a great job in that they've given us, I don't know, there's got to be hundreds, if not thousands, of pre-built reports that are inside that tool. And I think that's where people get confused, is because you go in there and there's all this information and there's all these graphs and it all looks great. And it's like, what does this mean? And what should I be looking at? What's important? The easiest way to do that is to set up your own basic reporting. So we look at it in three phases, which is site traffic, where's it coming from? And then site activity, once we know where somebody's coming from, what is it that they're doing when they're on the site? And then goals. And goals are really a reflection of where they fit into your sales cycle. Is there a way that you can set up a goal that makes sense for your sales cycle? So knowing that, this would be a sample report that we built for another customer. And if you look at it, it operates along that same way. The first column is all about where traffic comes from. This is a custom report. It shows the activity that happens on the site, which pages that they're actually looking at, that they're interested in, and then which goals are being met and from where. So in that case, it's the source medium goal report, which I don't know if that makes any sense to you guys, but you can tell what the source is, and then the medium is the general. So was it organic? And if it was organic, did it come from Bing or Google or some other search engine that we don't know about? And then what happened with the report over time? And so in this case, my suggestion is that you should set it up in a 3-part process. When you build custom reports, when you get into the reports, there's a dashboard up at the very top that you get to choose from, and you can build your own custom report. In building that own custom report, if you think in terms like this, like I'm just going to focus on traffic going into this column and scroll through all the fields. I should have looked this up. There's got to be 100 different fields that are in the free version of Google Analytics that could help us. You can do like we did here, sessions by traffic source, sessions by landing page. So we could see which landing pages they were coming in on, and then which area of the country. You can see this one's a heavy Midwestern focus on this particular customer. But by having to go through that list of 100 to build your own little report, what ends up happening is you're making yourself familiar with the tool. So this is why we make everybody build basic reports like this. Site activity. What are all the things I can measure that they're on the site? Like, is it, how much time have they spent on the site per session? How many pages are they visiting per session? How many people are new versus returning? There's a lot of sub-questions that go inside there, but for the most part, you can tell what's happening on the site. And we use these pieces to monitor activity. And then goals. At first, if there's no goal set up, maybe it's just, I just want to see who hits my contact page, who hits a pricing page, who hits my About Us, learn about the Salesforce page. Whatever the goal is, build the report. By building the report, you become very familiar with all the fields that are available to you. And it doesn't necessarily help you today, but what it does is it familiarizes you for times in the future when you want to pull more information in. So when would you want to do this? I don't know exactly for you, but I can tell you this story about my brother-in-law. He has a brewery up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Great place for a brewery. And inside of his brewery, right, are big, gleaming silver, aluminum, I don't know, I assume they're aluminum, cauldrons of, I'm going to call them cauldrons. I'm sure they have a technical name, but full of wonderful liquid that is in various stages of being beer. And when he takes me through that, because every time I'm up there, we go through the tour, and I'm like, show me what's going on and what you've added, because he's always adding new equipment. On each one of them is one of those liquid indicators that all it does is indicate the depth of the liquid that's in the pot. So like a coffee pot, if I'm at my local deli, it kind of has that indicator outside that tells you how full it is. He has those too. And as he's talking to me, it always fascinates me how he can walk by one, walk by the other, and he walks by the third one, sees where the level is. That forces him to pull up the clipboard that's attached and the grease pen, make some notes, flip through some pages, send a text, or call somebody based on the activity. That's what I see your Google Analytics, this kind of report should be. It should be your just general indicator of, this is generally where my traffic comes from. This is generally where this activity happens on the page. And this is in general what the goals are. None of this stuff is really actionable. But when you email it to yourself, because you can do that after you've set up the report, you can say, hey, email this to me once a week, like every Monday. I want to pull information Monday through Sunday and have it emailed to me on Monday. It will pull this information just by looking at it each week and just familiarizing yourself with it. What will happen is questions will pop up. Like, why did my traffic drop? Or why did my traffic go up? Why did my goals go down? Why did my goals go up? And that is what analytics is great for, because once you see this information, you may look at it week 5 comes around and you finally have, you know what, this is a question. I can now dig in here, or I can send somebody else in there to go find the answer to the questions that I have based on what I'm doing. So set up your own basic reporting mechanism because it helps you familiarize yourself with the tool. And it's also just a great way to keep track of any activity on your business based on the amount of activity that you expect to see online. All right, which brings me back to this point, right? Setting goals that match the business development process. If we get back to how we make decisions or how people make decisions in general, and then the way our customers specifically, what their little journey is towards our product or solutions that are like ours. Once we have that, we need to be able to set goals that match the business development process. So if we have a website, how is it that we can take that website and match these things back so that analytics can actually help us? In this case, I was going to show you a thing that the way that this is important, and the way it was important to this capital company, is because not all visitors are alike to their website. They have they didn't have a ton of traffic because most of their business was done offline, but they did have some early stage decision making people, right? People who were just introduced to the company who would come to the website, and then more importantly, they had some late stage people that would come to the website, which was right before the close. And the other one was employees. When they're always recruiting people, so new employees would go to the website. What we ended up focusing on was the late stage. And what we'd asked ourselves was, where in this process are we most interested? Do we care about traffic that comes in early stage when they're just investigating us? It turns out we really didn't care, and they didn't care that much. But what they did care about was at the end of it, before the CEO would go out and help close these deals, were these people looking him up because he was being new and introduced to the meeting, right? The first time they'd heard his name, they probably got exposed to it when they did early research, but then when it's our CEO, Jack, and he's coming out to have a meeting with us, and we're going to talk about finishing this thing off, where is he in this process? And we put him front and center on the homepage. This is actually their homepage. And then we measured activity on his bio from the areas of the country that we were working in over time. So all this was an indicator. We were testing this theory that we could help increase the close rate. And anecdotally, what Jack said was, when he walked in the room, they tended to know more about him than they'd ever known before. And oftentimes he got the, oh, you're the CEO, like this is important, which is what they needed as they were working on this product, which was brand new, and they needed to introduce it to the marketplace. So that would be an example of the business goals that we had looked for, kick out these reports on the back end. So if we go back to what those reports look like on that back end, on this right-hand side, that goal was to a page, his page, and then where the geography that they were coming from. And guess what? That information is in analytics, and it was helpful to them. If nothing else, I think it just gave Jack confidence that when he was going out there, that it was not a waste of his time. So that's number 3. So if you're keeping track at home, set up a basic report. It was number 2. Install tracking on every page was number 1. And make sure that goals in analytics are matched to your particular business development process. Then what you have to start doing is separating the interesting from the important, or the important from the interesting information, because all of it is kind of interesting. I don't know if you've heard, I pulled this picture up because you used that parable of taking blind people and introducing them to an elephant. So they can't see it's an old proverb and I'm not going to get it right, but they have no idea what an elephant is. So the guy at the far right, who goes out and grabs the tail. He says, well, obviously this is a rope, a strong rope, a flexible rope, so that we can tie things together. But the guy right next to him grabs onto that giant foot of the elephant and says, oh, no, this is a tree. This is a big warm tree, right? And so the parable is obviously nobody has the complete picture of what things are, and we want to make sure that we don't fall into the same trap. So since we have so much information in there, where is it that we start? We want to start, again, with that customer cycle. But just be aware of any advice that you're getting from, it's really easy to go pull tons of these pre-built reports from the internet and just you import them into analytics, and you have this great new report that you can start to look at. Let's make sure that it actually matches up with the important information you need from your sales cycle. I compare it to losing weight, right? Which is, you've got some people who are like, oh, you need to weigh yourself daily. And then other people are like, that's crazy. You need to weigh yourself once a week. Other people are like, oh, no, you don't, just go by how your clothes are fitting, as to whether or not your efforts are working. And guess what? They're probably all valid in some way, shape, or form, but what's best for you, that's different. And that's what we're after when we're talking about this information. We subscribe here to the rule of 30 is what we say when we're trying to help market and generate new leads. And that is that people need to be exposed to an idea 10 times, right? So the research says, oh, it's at least 10 times, 9 or 10 times that they need to be exposed to an idea before they start to accept it, right? Like hearing your favorite song. The first time you hear it, it's interesting. Second time you start getting used to it. Now, if any 80s, for me, if the 80s radio station comes on, I know all the words. They're all great songs. Kids don't understand because half the time they've never heard them before. That's what we say when we say the rule of 30. You need to be exposed to something 9 to 10 times before you can, before the message takes hold. And that, unfortunately, in today's day and age, it takes at least 3 efforts to get in front of people. So if you are not planning 30 touches in front of your customers, there's a good chance your message is not getting through at all. Analytics helps us understand that. And if we can increase the number of touches and increase the number of touches that come through our website so that we can actually match that to our sales cycle, we're doing pretty good. Let me give you an example. I'm trying to think of one. A client who, when he's separating important from interesting, you can't take this too far. And what he did is he's taking it too far. He is now saying that all of his Facebook activity is completely siloed off of his online activity. Well, the good news is that you can actually, when it comes to Google Analytics or Facebook Analytics or LinkedIn Analytics, whatever analytics you're using, you can share this information across so you can see what these people are doing. But the danger is that he's trying to really figure out what his Facebook people are doing, and we're trying to show him, well, they're coming to your website because they still have questions. Some people are taking advantage of your offer right away. That's awesome. Other people are needing to do some research on you because they've never heard of you before. That rule of 30, it's multiple touches, and it's multiple touches across everywhere that they use to make a decision. And how can you be there when that happens? So he looks at it and he says, well, the important information is that my website is doing nothing to help my business and Facebook is doing everything. The reality is it's a lot more complex than that. We're probably going back to that data informed versus data driven. We'll probably never be able to measure everything exactly perfectly. Humans are flawed creatures. We make weird decisions for no good reason. We need our systems to reflect that. So make sure when you're looking through the new information that you're getting, that you're really trying to tease out the things that are most important to you versus just things that are interesting. Our bounce rate is really high. Well, is that interesting or important? I don't know. We need to ask a few more questions. Okay, so number 5. Now that we have this information, so we've taken it, we've installed analytics, we've matched up to our sales cycle, we have set up reports, we are knocking these things back and forth against each other. We're focusing on what we think is the most important actions. And now it's time. This is what most people want to do, right? The reason we get into analytics is because we don't want to sit around and think about what it is that we do next. What we want to do is we want to take action. We want to jump in. the value of analytics is going month to month and then year to year. And so when we go all the way back to the first slide I showed, the first step was making sure it was on every single page. We just had an issue with the client where it looked like it was on every single page. And so we were designing a new website. We launched a new website. And when we launched this new website, it turns out that their old website that we were looking at had all the good information that we expected to port across, and we were able to mimic that. But there was also a couple ghost websites that were out there that were not being tracked. And there was a lot of good activity that was coming from them. So our comparisons suddenly got a lot less accurate going forward, and the decisions that we were making were in jeopardy of sending us down the wrong path. So we like to set up action, but at the same time, it's a lot easier if we have really accurate data going back 18 months versus accurate data that goes back 30 days. So get the information and be able to draw up accurately that when we look at last month, last year, last quarter, that information is the same. When we see a graph like the one that's there, which is, gosh, this year is the blue up on top, or maybe that was last year, and it's like, which one is better, which one is worse? It's hard to say because on those pages, we had a lot of pages that were actually a different website that were tracking a lot of activity on, and a lot of junk activity that came from third-party sources. There's a lot of people that, I don't even know if I would love to know if it works. I should probably contact one of these companies where they are spamming your website with a spider, and it's like best SEO. So like, I'm going to look at analytics one day and see like, oh, I got traffic from best SEO. I should contact them and hire them for my SEO. I have no idea if it works. I doubt it does. But when you have a lot of junk traffic like that, and then you start cleaning it up, your year to year, it gets a little harder to separate. So instead of all pages, what we do is we build a lot of filters and build some filters, which is just really, I'm only interested in the people that went more than one page deep into my website, or only traffic from the US, or sometimes we have a lot of agriculture companies that are marketing locally. So they're really I just really want things that are around Iowa, things around that are in my sales territory. You can build those. And then when you're doing comparisons year to year, the actions that you take, the tests that you engage in, you can actually measure, are you really moving the needle, or is it, are you going the wrong direction, which is really what I'm after. And so sometimes this information is wonderful, but it's more often than not, it will has the, since it's not, we can't see 100% of all traffic in our industry or with our customers. We are taking little snapshots along the way and making guesses as best we can. And I'll tell you what, it's better than not doing it, but just be careful thinking that it is perfect information, and that if we just fix this, if we just get people deeper into our website, our sales are going to go up. That's not always the case. So, all right, so this is what we've done. Excuse me. We have covered the three big concepts behind analytics. Where's your website in your sales cycle? When we get all this information, how is it that we can use it to make ourselves smarter, but not necessarily expect it to make decisions for us? And then how do our customers do things? Getting kind of out of our world. If the first two are in our world, the third one is really out of our world, and understanding where it is that our customers fit in. And then the 5 steps to make sure that you can get the most from lead generation out of your efforts: installing tracking on every page, basic reporting that you set up yourself in a custom report, setting goals to match the business development process, separating important from interesting information, and prioritizing actions. So those are the big ones. And the biggest mistakes that I see are really these. When it comes down to it, the things that are holding most people back is they're taking too many actions based on incomplete information. They aren't they're not set up so that they have complete information. They aren't spending enough time with their customers, mapping that customer decision process and trying to find out where their website fits into that. Those are the big ones when we say the biggest mistakes that people are making. All right, so immediate next steps. Greg, what is it that we should do next? Well, the first thing is make sure analytics is installed on every page. Sounds simple. It's a little harder in action. So make sure you have that. If you haven't used Google Tag Manager, that's a great way to do it if you have control of your website, because at least you know Google Tag Manager will be on every page. Map your customer's decision process. So this is literally calling them and saying, can I talk to you about what it is that you do? We have a template that we're going to give you on the handouts page when we email that to you. We'll email the recording, and then we'll email the handouts with you. It'll show you how to get analytics on every page in case you do it yourself or you're not exposed to it. I'll give you a questionnaire that you can use where you can start asking questions of customers and listen carefully for their description of how they made these decisions. And then the last thing is how to build a custom report. Get in there and mess around. Make a custom report that makes sense for your business. It'll change. You'll get better at this. You'll require more information sometimes and less information, but it really does familiarize you with what goes on inside that tool and makes everything else easy. Good stuff, right? Q&A. I haven't seen any questions coming into the chat box, but this is really the time. If you have questions, I am here to answer them. Common questions that we've had so far. The questions that we've gotten from this before is, once again, I don't have it installed. How do I install it again? And we can walk you through that. I am offering to everyone, if you want to schedule it, schedule a time. We'll run through 20 minutes to ask your questions about your business. I realize sometimes these webinars can be a little generic. They're meant to be because they're an overview. If you have specific questions on how to do something, 9 times out of 10, myself or one of our other analytics people can walk you through it. It's a service we provide. We're happy to do it, where we can show you how to build that reports that make sense to you, or even if you want to talk through getting your customer mapping. Yeah, if there's no other questions, then let's wrap this up. You've been very patient, 45 minutes. So, by the way, this is part of a program, US Farm Data. We have spun off a piece of our company, which is more of a consulting company. I think the name is probably going to change from Lead Gen Tools. I think it's Lead Gen Compass is the latest thing we've been messing around with. But we have a pilot program where we take the analytics, AdWords, Facebook, LinkedIn, our database is our farm database, third-party databases, and we put them all together in a way to generate leads with you, really helping your marketing team, helping your sales team generate more leads. So we're happy to offer that, and that's one of the things that we'll give you as a bonus for attending. We're going to send you a link to a book. It's a book I wrote called The Human Being's Guide to Business Growth, and it's a simple process for unleashing the power of your people for growth. I also wrote a book with Bill Matern called The Perfect Growth Formula, which is a way to look at how all this works together, inbound, outbound activity, but tied together with managing data and how we use that to leverage our own efforts so we can get better results. So look for these coming. We'll send a link to the slides, the recording, other handouts, and then we'll also give you a chance to sign up for this, to learn more about this pilot program where we take all these tools and design a simple little reporting mechanism for you that you can use to generate more leads or get better results from your existing campaigns. So thank you for listening to all this as I yacked along. If you have any questions, look for an email from Bill Matern and then a call from Sue Donaldson, and we can schedule some time together and go through it. But thanks for everything, and have a great Thursday.